Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Wordfence Live. Email is an essential part of your online business and your WordPress site. So today on Wordfence Live, we're going to talk about what you need to do to stop spammers from using your site and potentially destroying your site or your brand's reputation in the process. So these email spammers, they target high reputation WordPress domains to trick spam filters and target everyone with everything from pharmaceutical spam to phishing. So stay tuned. We're going to get started in just a moment. Thanks for joining us again today on Wordfence Live. Today is December 1st, 2020. We hope that you're having a great week and we're happy you're joining us today. If you celebrated Thanksgiving last week, hope it went really well for you. And if you did not, hopefully you had a great week as well. Let us know where you're viewing from. I see we have a bunch of people waiting in the chat today, so we appreciate you coming over early and sending some questions over. We're going to get to some of those as soon as possible here. I'm streaming from just south of the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area again, and it is snowy and a little bit cold today. So not my favorite weather, but I'm sure many of you are enjoying this. I know we got some other Pennsylvanians here as well. My name is Scott Miller. I'm a customer support engineer here at Wordfence. In a few moments, I will be joined by your favorites, QA engineer and threat analyst Ram Gall, as well as threat analyst Chloe Chamberlain. Also joining us in chat to monitor the comments and answer some questions for you are some more folks from our customer support team. It'll be Tim Cantrell and Adam Goodland. They're helping out, so you can say hi to them and they'll do their best to help you with any questions you have. If you have any other questions, anything sensitive, you can send those to feedback@wordfence.com. As I mentioned in today's episode, we're talking about protecting your WordPress site's reputation, and more specifically through email and spam. So as you know, as a site owner using WordPress, email is a critical part of a WordPress site. And depending on what kind of site you're running, you might be thinking your forgotten password routines at a very basic level. If you're running a WooCommerce store, you're likely emailing out receipts, shipping update notifications, marketing materials, and you want to make sure that your customers are getting those and seeing those when they should and as soon as possible. If you're running a membership site, you're using email to keep your members engaged with new content on your site, so you're sending out a lot of email there. Maybe you're running a learning management system and selling courses. With the way schools and classes are today, you might be sending out new lessons and quizzes and contacting students that way. So you need to make sure that those emails are getting there. So no matter what sort of content you're selling or sending out online, you know that the money is in your list and that's your email list. So engaging with your customers is key to building your business. Protecting the reputation of your emails and your domain from where they are coming from is also very critical to your site and for your brand. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Make sure that you have everything set up correctly and as safe and conveniently as possible. So we'll go over that. If you're excited about the content and the stream today, please hit the like button below the video and let us know that you're interested in this sort of content going forward, and we will do similar streams. You can also hit the subscribe button and the bell to be notified when we go live in the future. We've been going live every Tuesday at noon, 9 a.m. Pacific time, so you would get a notification there. If we post any new videos on YouTube, you would also get a notification. And we don't post a ton there, so you will not get overwhelmed. We do post some walkthroughs for different features and new products, such as WordPress, or the Wordfence Central Teams, rather. So if you haven't set that up yet, give a look at that. Very cool tool to use, and we'll talk about that today. So we're broadcasting to YouTube, as I mentioned earlier, so this can be seen openly, your comments. We ask that you don't share anything sensitive or private in the chat, as this will be viewable after the fact. So anything that you have specific to your site, if your site's having issues, if you're hacked, you can send a message to feedback@wordfence.com. Use the subject line Wordfence Live, and one of us will respond to you there and give you a hand. So let's get started by bringing in QA engineer, threat analyst Ram Gall, as well as threat analyst Chloe Chamberlain. How are you two doing?
It's finally winterish in Arizona, so I can go outside again, which is pretty cool.
What's the temperature for winterish?
I think it's probably going to be a high of 75 today or something like that.
That
Low of
sounds
like
pretty nice.
50.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. What about you, Chloe?
Things are great. The holidays are coming. Well, they're here technically. The snow is coming. I'm just really happy. I'm so excited. I love the holidays. It's one of my favorite times. So I'm just going to be really happy over the next month. So things are good. And the weather today is not good because it's 60, and I'm not happy with it.
You would rather have the snow?
Yeah.
Okay. We have Harry says that your tree is too big. It
Yeah.
looks really good, though. I like it. I have the opposite issue there. Mine, I don't know which side is. I got a mini tree, so yeah. It's perfect for me and Goldie, the cat. So.
No.
So we are going to be talking about spam and email today. So let's get started just with a general, how prevalent is spam? How frequently are we seeing spam in emails, Chloe?
Yeah, so we have a couple of statistics for you. Spam is about 45% of all the emails sent out there. About 14.5 billion spam emails are sent every day, which is a lot. And spam costs businesses around $20.5 billion every year. And I just checked my spam inbox this morning, and I think it was about 1,800 spam emails over the past 30 days. So if that can give you a little bit of an idea of how many spam emails are sent, go check your spam inbox. You might have a lot in there too. And check out your emails while you're there because it's fun to look at them. So normally we're talking about spammers using malicious mailers on hacked WordPress sites, but today we're going to be showing you a closer look at how they can be using your clean domain to spoof emails and perhaps send emails on your behalf, and what you can do to prevent that from happening.
So this just gives the spammers a nice domain and a clean place to send out whatever they want, pretty much, right?
Yeah, if you don't have the proper security method or protocols in place. Yeah.
Okay.
I thought it used to be more than 45%, which I suppose is a testament to the effectiveness of these techniques.
And thankfully, we're going to talk about some of those today, and hopefully, if anybody needs a hand setting those up, we're going to help you with the best methods here and send you in the right direction there. So let's move to another basic thing. Now we know how prevalent spam is. Almost half of emails, it seems, and that's, as Ram said, thankfully that's down a little bit potentially. But
Yeah, I don't remember the old numbers, but I think it used to be somewhere up in the 80% range.
Oh, wow.
ooh, yeah, that's rough. Let's talk a little bit about how email works. So anybody who is unfamiliar and maybe just getting started, where do we want to start with that?
Before we begin, did we do our swag question?
Thank you. Let me look. Do you remember our swag question, Chloe?
Yes. What does SMTP stand for?
And we ask that you do not answer this in the chat if at all possible. And it'll be the first 5 people who correctly get the question right, which, as Chloe mentioned, what does SMTP stand for? And we will be talking about that very shortly here.
Do we have the quiz link posted?
Let me see.
There we are, right there. Yep.
There we go.
Tim's
So
got it.
get-
In there.
Cool.
And
You can
Adam.
get over to the link and get your guess in there. Thank you, Chloe, for reminding me. It skipped my mind there. So now that we got the swag question, we can get into how exactly does email work.
Yeah. So I'm going to start by saying, so email uses something called SMTP, and what this basically does is it operates at the application layer of the TCP/IP and OSI models, and so it uses a process called store and forward to basically move your emails across the networks and get it to its destination. And I can share a little, just like a simple diagram real quick that I just pulled up on Google. So let me share my screen. It's right there. So basically you have a sender, and then the SMTP is going to transfer it to the sender's mail server over the internet and to the receiver's mail server, where it then uses POP3 or IMAP to deliver that to the receiver. And so you're probably wondering what this stands for, because you all answered the question. SMTP is the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. So if you got that right and you were the first 5, congratulations.
If you were one of the first 5 to answer in the link, I see we have a handful answer very quickly in the chat. Good job getting it right, but got to get that into the link there. So, yes, SMTP, Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. Anything to add to that, Ram?
Well, sometimes it doesn't all happen in one hop. You can send a message and, one server will send it to another server, which will send it to another server before it finally reaches its destination, much like almost everything else on the internet. So,
and it happens very, very quickly.
Yes, it does. However, because it's a fairly old protocol, it opens the doors to less than scrupulous ways of doing things, because it more or less takes it on faith that the from address is who it's actually being sent on.
And that leads us to our next topic, right?
Yep, email spoofing. I think Chloe had a pretty cool demo for this. Did you have a demo for that working, or do you want me to try and run it? Or?
I do have the demo, and we'll see if it works.
Okay.
Everything is always unpredictable. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. And so basically I just have, I had a couple of different email testers. So let's try this one, see if this one works. And so basically what you can do is you can set, so anybody can do this. This is how easy it is to spoof emails. And I'll explain to you what spoofing is as I go along. So basically, spoofing is using someone else's domain or email address to send emails on your behalf. So if I could use my work email, chloe@wordfence.com, as an attacker and set the sender's email to that email address, to that email, and it'll look like it's coming from me. So it's basically faking the identity of the email address in a way. So for today's demonstration, I'm just going to do the receiver's email. So I'm going to send it to Sally's catblog@gmail.com. And then I'm going to set the sender's email to just something really simple. So I know it'll go through, because I had a couple issues trying to actually get a good email to go through earlier. So we're going to do bob@bob.com. And so I don't own bob.com. I don't own anything associated with the email bob@bob.com. But I'm going to be able to send an email on behalf of bob@bob.com to my email. So we'll just send the subject as, we'll just leave it as subject and enter message. It could say anything like, I could pretend to be Chloe@wordfence.com and send an email to one of my colleagues but not actually as a colleague, because I'm an attacker, and say, hey, you need to look at this. So basically I could use it to phish someone at an organization. And so that's why people use spoofing, to make it look legitimate, to also bypass certain security protections that would otherwise make the email go into spam directly. So I'll go ahead and enter the email, and then I have to enter a security code, because the same security code from earlier. Interesting. Send. Let's see if this one works. So it says it was sent. We'll go over here. Just wait a second.
Might end up in your spam folder.
Yeah.
Depending on what bob.com has set up to manage this.
Yeah. And let me go ahead and pull up another site I used earlier, because one of them didn't work. So let's try this anonymous email sender as well. And I'm just going to do the same thing, bob@bob.com. We'll make this bob. bob@bob.com to Sally's catblog.com. Subject, hello.
Now, we talked about phishing recently on the show, and just sketchy emails, and I believe our quiz was going through a few different emails there. As far as identifying something like this, Chloe, is there anything you can really do as the recipient?
As a recipient, Ram, can you answer that real quick?
Yeah,
Sorry.
depending on what email platform you use, like most of the ones that you are likely to use, Gmail, Office 365, self-hosted Exchange services, will usually give an option to basically check for whether or not a email sender is actually allowed to send email from that domain. So that's the good news. However, there's enough people still using email systems that don't perform these checks, or where the checking is lax enough that, it's still worth the spammer's while. So something that does get brought up a lot is, and that I've actually, in previous jobs gotten a lot of questions about, is, sometimes you might notice that your email on your, self-hosted domain is getting a lot of bounce backs from messages that you didn't send. You're literally getting bounce backs and you're saying, oh, I did not send that. Wait, that's spam. Why am I getting bounce backs for spam? Well, this is why. People are using your domain to basically spoof spam messages and send them out. The fact that you're getting bounce backs, if you are getting bounce backs, that's a good thing. That means that the messages are not going through. That means you or, your host or registrar has probably already set up something like SPF, which we will get to in a little bit. Now, the point of things like SPF, DKIM and DMARC is not to protect you from other people spamming you. It is to protect your domain's reputation. It is to protect the people that, spammers might be sending spam to, trying to spoof your domain. So that is something that we should be a little bit clear on, that, this is not going to stop you from receiving spam. That's what spam filters are for, and spam filters are very good. But this is to prevent your domain from being listed as a spammy domain.
So it's not always a bad thing to see that. And I have a feeling you've been asked that question before.
Yes.
As
Yes,
far
I
as
have.
the bounce backs. Now, what are we seeing here, Chloe? It looks like it went through.
Yeah, so luckily it went through to spam, so that's good for me as the receiver. But you can see here that it came from bob@bob.com. And I don't own bob.com. I don't own any mail stuff associated with it. So I was basically able to spoof the email address bob@bob.com and send it to myself. And this is how attackers do it. They spoof emails. They don't use the internet applications. They'll script their own and stuff. But this is how easy it can be to do it, and this is why they're doing it.
And Ram, you said depending on how Bob would have had this set up and how their domain would have had this set up, this could have either not sent or bounced back. Is that correct?
Correct. We will actually get to that, but I can actually check to see if bob.com has any SPF records. It looks like they don't have SPF records or any other TXT records set up. So it looks like Gmail is basically good enough that if you don't have this set up, your email has a lower chance of getting through. And that's something that Scott, you brought up earlier. One of the reasons to actually set up records for your domain is if you have a mass mailing list and you want to make sure that your messages don't go to the spam folder and don't get bounced, having ways of authenticating the messages you're sending, or at least having, making it possible for recipients to verify that, they came from your domain, from an authorized MTA for that domain, having that in place makes it a lot less likely that people on your mailing list aren't going to get your messages because they went to the spam folder.
Okay. Definitely something to keep in mind. And depending on where you're at with your site right now, we've done some, sort of startup streams where you're just getting going with maybe a WooCommerce store, just getting going with your new site. So these are some things to take into account there when you're setting up, if you're expecting to send out a bunch of mail. So this is a great place to start there. So that was a little bit on email spoofing there, and bob.com was the one sending out the email for Chloe. What do we have next, Ram?
I think we should probably discuss the simplest way to prevent stuff like that from happening, which is something called SPF, or Sender Policy Framework. Okay. So it's generally, I recommend adding it to your domain's DNS records pretty much as soon as you get the domain. But it's a DNS record. It basically that means someone can look up the records for your domain and see, oh hey, this domain has an SPF record. It says that only this server, this set of IPs is allowed to send mail for this domain. So it's one of the oldest ways of adding this some degree of authenticity. And if again you've signed up with something like Google Apps for Business or Office 365, they have pretty excellent tutorials on what their SPF records should be. If you are running self-hosted email, you may have to manually set up your SPF records, though even there's SPF record generators where you can say, like, okay, here's the mail server IP I want to use, here's what I want to allow to send a mail from this domain, and it'll generate a record for you. So you don't necessarily have to know the syntax, though it's fairly simple.
So this is fairly reasonably easy to set up for the most part.
It is super easy. Like here, I'm actually going to share my screen. And just to give you an example of what you'd want if you were, say, using Gmail. So if you were using Gmail for everything or Google Apps for Business, you'd want to set up a TXT record for, v equals FPF1 include spf.google.com. And that means that basically only those servers are allowed to send mail from your domain name.
Okay, yeah, and going back to what we saw with Chloe's example there, what is the case that happens there when you do have that set up, that SPF? That's what you checked on the bob.com for the SPF record, is that right?
Yes, that is what I checked. I didn't actually show it on the screen. But anyway, if there's an SPF record, so here's the thing. It still depends on how the recipient is set up. Like, a spammer can still spoof messages from your domain name, even if you have SPF set up. It's just that if the recipient is set up to check SPF records, they'll reject anywhere it doesn't match, or it put them in spam, depending on what their behavior is. It's just that most decent email providers are set up to check SPF records these days. If you're running your own homegrown email server, then you might not have it set up to check SPF records. But the majority of email services people use these days do check them.
So without the SPF setup, we're seeing attackers can potentially spoof your domain name, as we saw with what Chloe did there, and that can lead to phishing and other sort of attacks there. So something to keep in mind when you're setting this up. What else can happen there without that setup? Some other common things we see.
Well, first I want to get to one of Harold Palma's recommendation, TXT VSPF MX-all. So what he's recommending there is that, yes, if you're running a self-hosted mail server, what that setup basically says to do is that only the MX records, only the IPs or subdomains in the MX records are allowed to send mail. And this works for a lot of people because the MX, the mail exchange records are what SMTP uses to figure out where to send mail. And if you're using the same server to both send and receive mail, then that's a good and easy shorthand to use. So
that is good to know. I was looking for questions. I see we have Modder's Disposal mentioned about an increase in paint time using Wordfence, and we got we have some good videos and streams where we went over fast or slow in depth, and I believe we may have another one coming up, so you might want to keep an eye out for that. I don't know if you want to touch on that, Ram, a little bit out of scope of what we're talking about here. But we have touched on some of that before, so you can check out our prior streams there. So what we're talking about, we just went over what SPF is there, the sender policy framework, and what can happen, what you're going to see with that set up correctly, and if you do not have it set up. Anything to cover there, Ram, Chloe?
Yeah, I don't really have that much else. Just know that, SPF is pretty much the basics. If you don't do anything else, do this. It's very easy. It's not a perfect solution, but it's a really good start. So yeah, do it. Otherwise, people can use your domain and abuse your domain and cause it to lose reputation.
So you mentioned DKIM earlier. I think that's what we're going to be moving into. Is that right?
Yes, DKIM kind of takes it a step further. It stands for DomainKeys Identified Mail, and it uses public key encryption, which let's not get into that too much today. But public key encryption is basically something where you set up a key pair. You have a public key and you have a private key, and you can do two very cool things with these. If you have the public key is published and everyone knows it, you can use the public key to encrypt a message and then only decrypt it with the private key, which is actually how TLS works to some extent. That's a massive oversimplification. But anyways, you can do another thing. You can sign a message with the private key, and then the public key can verify that it was signed with that private key. That is to say, if you sign a message with a private key, only the public key can decrypt it, and if it wasn't signed with the private key, then the public key won't be able to basically validate it. I use the word decrypt, but yes, it validates it. So DKIM is sort of an extension of that, where you will publish the public key in another DNS record, another TXT record, actually. And then you can have your email client or the MTA or the SMTP server sign the message. It'll sign basically the message headers and the text portion of the body. And then whoever receives it can verify that signature matches up against the published public key. And yes, Malcolm, I would very much suggest using both of them. They're not perfect, but they're as good as most people will need. I mean, you can use things like PGP or SMIME, but the cool thing about DKIM and SPF is that, they don't have to be implemented at the client level. They can be implemented at the MTA level or, pretty much at any step along the chain where, you can have anyone who's, allowed to send mail can use DKIM to sign it, and then at some step on the receiving end, you can use like the spam filter to, verify. So.
Now, I was going to, Malcolm had the same question that I did there. So as far as for most users that have a WordPress site, would you recommend both, or is one going to be enough for an average user, or does it kind of depend on how much mail you're sending out?
I'd recommend both if you can do it, if you can reasonably do it. It is a lot easier to do DKIM if you are using, again, a hosted email service like Google Apps for Business or Office 365. Not trying to promote either of them, but they do make it real easy to add DKIM records to generate them, and they'll feed you what you need to add to your DNS. And
you had mentioned that SPF is fairly easy to set up. Is it similar for DKIM? Is it?
Yes, the main difference in ease between DKIM and SPF is that SPF is going to be pretty much a one-size-fits-all solution. Once you know what your mail servers are going to be, you can set up an SPF record right off the bat for it. You don't have to generate a key pair and, have that set up.
Now, Dave had a question. He asked if DKIM, he says, so DKIM does not add a signature to your email, but rather validates the sender?
As I understand it, DKIM does actually add a signature to the email. It signs some of the headers and the text content of the body. So it's not perfect. You do a replay attack. Like if you can intercept a DKIM signed message in the middle of sending, you can resend it at a later date. And I think you may also be able to add additional recipients without the signature being broken. Okay.
Scooby has a question. Says, don't you have to route the WordPress emails via your provider SMTP for DKIM to work?
That depends. I mean, if you are, depending on how cool you're feeling that day, you could feasibly have a mail server set up on the same server as your WordPress site and, have it do the DKIM signing of everything you send out. You could just have, send a mail or something set up on the same server, but most people aren't going to be doing that. Most people are going to be doing, a mail service like the Ksugs. I actually can't pronounce your name. I'm sorry. About MailChimp. A lot of people are going to be using MailChimp, and they should give you info for how to set up DKIM as well.
Okay, so that was DKIM. Let's move on, if you're ready, Chloe and Ram, to DMARC.
Give me.
Got some good questions, so we appreciate it. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them into chat, and if we don't get to them and you really need an answer, you can use the email that they are putting into chat there, the feedback@wordfence.com there.
Yeah, we got a question from VV Wizard 2011, which is, can a replay attack use a different attachment containing malware? And this is a cool one because I don't actually know, but send an email to feedback@wordfence.com and I will find out for you. And Lewis Westwood. So Itai Benzvi is asking about how they used to have DKIM and it sent them a daily report from each mailing server. And that's not actually from DKIM. That's from what we're going to get to next. Okay, never mind. He already said that. It's DMARC. So DMARC is basically a way to set up a security policy for how to handle SPF and DKIM. It basically tells recipients, here's what I want you to do with this information. So instead of just, kind of hoping that they'll handle it however they handle it, you can tell them, hey, I want you to check the SPF record, and if it's from a subdomain, that's fine. Or I want you to check the DKIM record, and if it's from a subdomain, I want you to not accept it. That's basically using strict or relaxed rules, and you can basically, set the alignment whether or not which of them it should check which ways. But the other cool things you can do with that is you can make a recommendation for what they do. If, you can recommend that, hey, if these don't match up, I would like you to put this in the spam folder, which is the quarantine option. Or you can set it to have the reject option, which is recommend that to the recipient that, hey, if these don't match up, I would like you to bounce this email. And you can set up an email address to send reports to of, which messages were rejected for which reasons. Yes, Mike Little says DMARC is an authentication policy, not a security policy. You are correct. Thank you for the correction.
I was going to say, I don't think Chloe is calling to fish Ram because I didn't see your fan, but yes. We did see that potentially last week, I believe. So we are talking about DMARC here, and you mentioned DMARC enforces SPF and DKIM authentication, right?
Well, it doesn't enforce them so much as it recommends to the recipient what to do with them. And the cool thing is that you can even set it up to, only apply it to a percentage of messages sent out, which can be super useful if you, have a large mailing list and you want to sort of implement them slowly.
So we've talked a little bit about these three with SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. So
we've got one other question that I find interesting from Robert Turner, which is, what about websites that are not using WordPress? Are other code platforms like Laravel is high risk? So here's the thing about this type of thing. It's independent of the platform you're using. If you have a domain and you don't have these set up, someone can spoof messages from that domain regardless of the code platform you're using, regardless of what you're running on it. You could have a Django site and they'll still be able to spoof messages from your domain. And we're also getting questions about, contact forms going to the spam folder of the recipient. Now, this is actually interesting from Shailesh G. So in that case, Yes, if you actually have it set up so that the way that the contact form sends email is through, an SMTP server that applies, that's on the list of allowed servers that has, DKIM set up, then that should help prevent that. We can't guarantee that no mail will go to the spam folder if you have these set up. It just minimizes the chances.
Now, Dave had mentioned DMARC is also implemented in DNS TXT records.
Correct. DMARC is specified in the TXT record. Mike Little is giving us info about how the policy is specified in the TXT record, but you do need to get some other things set up as well. As far as where the reports will be sent, yes, you do want some kind of postmaster email address set up to receive those reports at the very least. I'm not actually familiar with the ins and outs of setting it up on a self-hosted email platform, so he might be able to give us more info.
Now, Mike had asked if hosting providers typically set up these security elements themselves, or if that's something you should check. And
I've almost never seen hosting providers set these up. It is something you should always check, and especially since if depending on what you're using for email, you'll typically have to go into your DNS in order to change the MX records around in order to set up your email. This is something you should check.
Yeah, definitely something to take a look at. Now, as far as the differences of the three we talked about, let's touch there while we can. And that's, again, for anybody who may have joined late, SPF, DKIM, and DMARC is what we've been discussing over the past 15 or 20 minutes here.
So I guess the main differences are that SPF is very basic and very easy to set up. It's basically just a lookup check. There's also reverse DNS, which we didn't really get into because it's kind of hard to actually get for most people on a shared hosting account to actually get a reverse DNS record, a true one set up. You can do a pointer, a PTR record, but it's not really the same thing. So SPF is what you're mostly going to be relying on. But it's pretty easy if you know where your mail server is going to be and and which mail servers are allowed to send mail. You can set up an SPF record, and that covers a lot of the issues you'll see. If you have a large mailing list and you want to be a little bit more sure that the mail you send is authenticated as being from you, you have a better chance of not ending up in the spam folder if you set up a DKIM record. On the other hand, that does actually require a key pair to be generated. If you have a hosted service, they'll usually, generate the key pair and just give you the public key to stick in the TXT record. If you're doing your own email hosting, I recommend looking up a help article on how to do it, because I actually haven't done that myself. Though I have set it up, on hosted email services. DMARC, the main thing about that is it's a policy. It's not actually a way of actually authenticating where the email came from. It's just telling the recipient what you would prefer to happen, and a way for you to get information about anything that goes wrong.
And this was a similar question that I asked earlier. It sounds like you can pretty much get by then with the SPF, and of course, as we talked about and you just touched on, it does depend, what you're doing with your site and how much mail you're sending out. So I did see a question asking if somebody should set up all these. Definitely check, see what you have right now and on the hosting side, and as Ram said, don't expect anything additional to be set up. And then I think that SPF is a fine place to start, right, Ram?
Yeah, I honestly, if it's just like a personal email address and you're not going to be sending out any sort of marketing communications or customer communications, then SPF is probably okay. If you have a mailing list or you have a bunch of customers and you want to make sure that your mail doesn't end up in their spam folder, then maybe go the extra mile.
Now, before we wrap up here, we do have an honorable mention, I believe, right, Ram?
Let's see. Oh, are we talking about what we're doing next week, or? Oh,
Well, I was going to say the TLS.
oh, end-to-end encryption. We were going to talk about PGP and SMIME and how they offer much better authentication and non-repudiation. But the main problem is that, you have to have your email client set up to, process messages received that are signed via, PGP key. It's not something that happens on the mail transfer agent side. You can set it up, and it's pretty cool if you absolutely have to have, perfectly private emails that no one can read except for maybe the NSA. But did I say that? Actually, probably not even them. Not unless they really care. But yeah, it is possible to get actual, end-to-end encryption and, better non-repudiation than these. It's just that, for what we're really talking about, for the purposes of, domain reputation and making sure that, your website's commercial emails go through, you do not want to use PGP on your mailing list unless you're Bruce Schneier.
So
I think he still signs still think he still signs his mailing list with his PGP key.
I was going to say, before I forget here, we're going to go over our swag question. Thankfully, Chloe reminded me to ask it earlier. And the question was, what does SMTP stand for? Which we went over pretty early on. I believe that was the first thing we went over with the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. And our winners here, we got Harry Cron, Angela Goring, Sean Craig, Robert Campbell, and Rick Hayes all answered correctly and pretty quickly, is my guess, because we had some quick guesses there in the chat that were correct. So now, before we wrap up here, Chloe, Ram, anything to add on that we already touched on there that we went over? We went over quite a bit in a pretty short time there.
I think we may want to talk about what we're going to be talking about next week, which is WordPress 5.6 and PHP 8.
And 5.6 is going to release on the day of our stream, I believe. Is that right?
I believe so, yes.
So that'll be a good head start for anybody who is, going to be updating right away. You can tune in and gear up for that. We also have somebody special watching, a viewer right now, right?
Yes. Now I don't feel so bad about him knowing way more about this stuff than I do. Hi, Mike.
Yeah, so we have Mike Little, who you may know as the co-founder of WordPress. So we are honored to have you here and helping out in chat and testing our knowledge. We appreciate it.
Definitely.
So yes, Ram had mentioned, I see PHP 8. That's good. Campbell says PHP 8, you mean we have to upgrade from 5? Thankfully, I have not been in support seeing too many people on 5.6 or 5.4 like we used to, so we're getting there.
Yeah, we are. I think most sites we see are on 7-ish, 7 something these days, so...
Yes, so that's nice to see. So definitely tune in next week. We're going to be talking about the WordPress 5.6 release and any additions there. PHP 8. Ram, you had a good blog post. Was that about a week ago?
Yeah, I think it was beginning of last week about PHP 8, what it brings to the table, which is, long run quite a lot, but short run it's going to be a little tricky for especially for developers. I think it'll be worth it, but might take a little while before everyone's, up to speed.
Okay, so we got about a minute or two. Chloe, the mailing list, people should subscribe. They're going to see you and Ram's name there, quite a bit. I think we have a leaderboard. I think Ram and Chloe both
Chloe is still
despise
winning.
it. But so yes, that's you're going to see those names a lot from the mailing list. Definitely check out the mailing list. It's going to be the first that you hear about some of these issues for the most part. And whether you're a premium or free user, it gives you a heads up to get something updated or removed from the site. Our firewall rules are often put into place very quickly when we find these issues. So what about WordPress or Wordfence Central Teams? Ram, you did some QA on that. For anybody who's not familiar, what does that add to Central?
So Wordfence Central Teams allows you to collaborate with other people without handing them the keys to your account. If you're using Wordfence Central to manage a bunch of sites that have Wordfence installed, and you want to have other people, let's say you're an agency, you want to have other people in your company be able to manage those sites as well without having them access to the main account or the billing on the main account. You can still invite them to do that, and they can manage sites via Central. So yeah, It's pretty cool. It's one of the best implementations I've seen of this kind of thing.
No more sharing passwords. Very easy to set up. So if you currently have some sites added to Central, check it out. And if you don't have any sites added to Central, it's free to use and it's very easy to get your sites added there. You can add your free sites or your premium sites. Rem, you looked a little bit shocked or scared there. I wasn't sure which it was.
I'm not sure how I feel about logos. Like, what am I going to have for a logo? Should it be a gong?
Well, fun fact, Ram and I are the only two people on the team, I think, that have gongs.
You got a gong too?
I have a gong too, but I'm never home to ring it.
Oh, you should totally bring it out next time.
Yeah.
And Shailish
definitely
asked
agree.
if scanning can be done via Central. Yes, you can initiate scans on one or many sites via Central. I do recommend not simultaneously starting scans on like multiple sites hosted on the same hosting account. But then again, we generally recommend not having multiple sites hosted on the same hosting account anyway. So, and you can even view the scan results.
Susan says she wishes that she could send Chloe the snow, and I believe Susan is also from Pennsylvania as well, so I would
I'll take
gladly send all of our snow. What about the podcast? Last thing here, Ram, that is Friday or Saturday typically, right?
Yes, usually I'll do that with Kathy Zant, our director of marketing, who is the force behind making all these Wordfence live shows go so smoothly to a large extent. And we'll talk about whatever cool security and WordPress stuff has happened this week. We skipped last week because of the holiday, but I look forward to doing it again. So sign up.
Kathy and Ram will be back with force this week, and it will be a good show as always. You can check that out on Spotify and I believe iTunes. Check out the mailing list and the podcast in the footer of the wordfence.com page there. You can also check out our blog. If you enjoyed this show, if you enjoyed the content, please hit the like button. You can also hit the subscribe and the bell, and you'll be notified when we go live. Anything to add, Ram, Chloe, before we clock out here?
Just thanks for watching, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
We appreciate it, and we will be back same time next week on Tuesday at noon Eastern time. Until then, we hope you have a good week, and we appreciate you stopping by. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.